In the year 2020, at Los Angeles, California, a young man named Alex was looking for a yoga studio to rent. He was an avid yoga enthusiast and wanted to improve his skills and flexibility. He also had a blog where he posted his photos and videos of his yoga poses and routines. He had a decent number of followers who admired his dedication and talent. He searched online for some affordable and convenient options and came across an ad on Craigslist that caught his eye. It was a spacious and cozy studio in a quiet neighborhood, with hardwood floors, large windows, and a sound system. The rent was only $50 per hour, which seemed like a bargain. The landlord, who called himself Mr. Smith, said he was out of town and could not show him the place in person, but he sent him some photos and a video tour of the studio. He also gave him the address and the code to enter the building. Alex was impressed by the studio and decided to book it for the next day. He contacted Mr. Smith and paid him through PayPal. He received a confirmation email with the details and instructions. He was excited to try out the new place and share his experience with his blog followers. The next day, he packed his yoga mat, his phone, and his tripod and headed to the studio. He arrived at the address and found a 4-story brick building with a sign that said Yoga Studio. He entered the code on the keypad and heard a beep. He opened the door and walked into a dimly lit hallway. He followed the signs to the studio, which was on the 3rd floor. He reached the studio door and opened it with another code. He stepped inside and smiled. The studio looked exactly like in the photos and video. It was clean, spacious, and cozy. He felt a warm and inviting vibe from the place. He turned on the lights and the sound system and played some relaxing music. He set up his tripod and phone near the window and started recording his video for his blog. He introduced himself and explained that he had rented this studio through Craigslist and that he was going to show some of his favorite yoga poses and routines. He smiled at the camera and said, "Let's get started." He rolled out his mat on the floor and began his warm-up exercises. He stretched his arms, legs, neck, and back. He breathed deeply and calmly. He felt good and relaxed. He moved on to some more challenging poses, such as the downward-facing dog, the warrior pose, the tree pose, and the bridge pose. He demonstrated each pose with grace and skill. He explained how each pose benefited his body and mind. He looked at the camera occasionally and smiled. 11. He decided to end his video with a crow pose, which was one of his favorites. It involved balancing on his hands with his knees resting on his elbows and lifting his feet off the ground. It required strength, balance, and concentration. He positioned himself on his mat and placed his hands on the floor shoulder width apart. He bent his elbows slightly and lifted his hips up. He brought his knees close to his chest and placed them on top of his elbows. He shifted his weight forward and lifted one foot off the ground. Then he lifted the other foot off the ground. He held the pose for a few seconds, feeling proud of himself. He looked at the camera and said, "And that's how you do a crow pose." Suddenly, he heard a loud click behind him. He turned his head slightly and saw that the lights in the studio had gone out. He felt a surge of fear in his chest. He wondered what had happened. He tried to keep calm. He thought maybe it was just a power outage or a blown fuse. He thought maybe he should end the video now. He thought maybe he should get out of here as soon as possible. But before he could do anything, he felt something grab him from behind. He felt something cold and hard press against his neck. He felt something sharp pierce his skin. He felt something wet trickle down his throat. He felt something hot fill his lungs. He felt something dark engulf his vision. He felt something silent take over his voice. He felt nothing at all. In the weeks that followed Alex's disappearance, a wave of panic and intrigue swept through the city of Los Angeles. Friends, family, and followers grew increasingly worried as the young man's blog went silent. Calls to his phone went unanswered, and his social media accounts lay dormant. The mystery of what had happened to Alex consumed the minds of those who knew him and many more who had followed his online yoga journey. The police launched a thorough investigation, starting with a Craigslist ad that had led Alex to the mysterious studio. They tracked down the PayPal transaction and Mr. Smith, the supposed landlord. However, their efforts revealed that Mr. Smith was a pseudonym, and the trail led to a dead end. It turned out that the address provided was for a vacant building, and the codes for entry had been changed. Detectives dug deeper, scouring the dark corners of the internet for any leads. They traced the IP address from which Mr. Smith had communicated with Alex, only to discover that it was routed through a maze of proxy servers and dead ends. It seemed as though the elusive culprit had covered their tracks meticulously. Despite their best efforts, the case eventually grew cold. Leads dried up and media attention began to wane. The city moved on, but the mystery of Alex's disappearance haunted those who had known him and even those who hadn't. Over time, theories and speculations circulated. Some believed that he had been targeted because of his online presence, while others thought it might have been a random act of violence. A few conspiracy theories even emerged, suggesting that Alex had staged his disappearance for publicity. But deep down, no one truly knew what had happened that fateful day in the yoga studio. The studio itself became a place of urban legend, whispered about in hushed tones by locals. Some claimed it was haunted, while others believed it to be cursed. Few dared to enter, and the building fell into further disrepair. As the years passed, the memory of Alex and the mystery of his disappearance faded, becoming just another unsolved enigma in the sprawling city of Los Angeles. His blog remained frozen in time, a poignant reminder of a young man who had vanished without a trace, leaving only his yoga poses as a lasting testament to his existence. The case of Alex's disappearance remained a haunting mystery, a tale that the city couldn't forget, a story that would be passed down through the generations, ensuring that the memory of the young man who had once graced the yoga studio would never truly disappear. Two, in the year 2017, at a sweltering summer evening in Florida, a seemingly ordinary man named Michael found himself on the precipice of a life-altering ordeal. His choice to sell a smartphone through Craigslist, a decision made with a sense of anticipation, would soon thrust him into a harrowing and unexpected journey filled with darkness, despair, and ultimately, redemption. Florida, with its shimmering coastline and lush landscapes, was the backdrop for this fateful encounter. Michael, a middle-aged man with an unassuming demeanor, had decided to part with his smartphone, looking to upgrade to a newer model. Eager to find a buyer, he turned to Craigslist, an online marketplace that connected him with potential purchasers from all walks of life. On a sultry summer morning, Michael posted an ad for his smartphone on Craigslist. The advertisement was met with swift interest. Within hours, his phone buzzed with a message from a prospective buyer named Sarah. They exchanged pleasantries and swiftly agreed to meet at a bustling mall near their respective locations. As Michael arrived at the designated meeting place, anxiety began to creep into his thoughts. He had heard stories of Craigslist deals gone awry, but he brushed aside his unease, reminding himself that most transactions were smooth and uneventful. With the smartphone tucked safely in his pocket, he scanned the mall's crowded atrium. A young woman, Sarah, sat on a bench, her eyes glued to her phone screen. Michael approached her cautiously, extending a friendly hand. As they introduced themselves, Sarah's demeanor appeared cordial, confirming that she had come to purchase his smartphone. Negotiations commenced, and an agreement was reached. A satisfied smile crossed Sarah's face as she counted out the cash. In the midst of this seemingly routine transaction, a moment of dreadful betrayal erupted. A searing pain gripped Michael's chest, leaving him gasping for breath. He glanced downward, his vision clouded by shock, and was met with a horrifying sight. Sarah had drawn a gleaming blade, and with shocking swiftness, she plunged it into Michael's chest. 11. The pain was excruciating, and Michael's mind reeled in disbelief. Instinct took over as he attempted to fend off his attacker, but Sarah's strength and determination were overpowering. The blade found its mark again and again, punctuating the scene with grisly violence. Blood poured from Michael's wounds as he fell to the ground, consciousness slipping away. With his last ounce of strength, he watched in helpless horror as Sarah snatched the smartphone and fled, disappearing into the bustling mall crowd. Michael lay there, broken and bleeding, a victim of a vicious assault that had come out of nowhere. Passers-by, alarmed by the gruesome scene unfolding before them, dialed 911 in frantic haste. Within mere minutes, sirens wailed through the Florida air, and paramedics descended upon the scene. Michael's life hung by the thinnest of threads as they rushed into the hospital, their deft hands working feverishly to stanch the bleeding and stabilize his failing vital signs. In the emergency room, a team of dedicated medical professionals waged a valiant battle to save Michael's life. His family and friends were notified, and they rushed to his side, their hearts heavy with dread. In the agonizing hours that followed, they gathered in the hospital waiting room, clinging to the fragile hope that Michael would survive. Meanwhile, the wheels of justice began to turn. The police, armed with security footage from the mall, initiated a relentless hunt for Sarah. Through careful examination of the surveillance tapes, they identified her as the assailant, setting in motion a citywide manhunt. It didn't take long for her to be apprehended, a troubled past catching up with her at last. Sarah, a young woman with a turbulent history marked by drug abuse and a revolving door of jail cells, had been driven to her desperate act by a gnawing need for money. However, the vicious attack had been an unplanned, impulsive act that left her own life in tatters. As the investigation deepened, a disconcerting pattern emerged. Sarah was revealed to be a repeat offender, her rap sheet a damning testament to her dangerous criminal inclinations. The gravity of her crimes cast a long shadow, and the date for her trial was set for the following year. Michael, the survivor of her brutal attack, was summoned to take the stand and testify against her. The day of the trial arrived, and Michael, still bearing the physical and emotional scars of his ordeal, was determined to see justice served. With a mixture of trepidation and resolve, he took the witness stand and recounted the horrifying events of that fateful summer day. His testimony, a raw and vivid narrative, left an indelible impact on the jury, who were resolute in their conviction of Sarah's guilt. Sarah, in a somber courtroom, received a sentence that matched the gravity of her crimes, a daunting 25 years in prison. It was a moment of closure for Michael, a chance to put the nightmare behind him and finally begin the arduous process of healing. In the aftermath of his traumatic experience, Michael embarked on a journey of recovery and transformation. He found solace in the unwavering support of his family and friends. Slowly, he pieced his life back together, forging a new path that led him away from the shadows of his past. In 2021, 4 years after the vicious attack, Michael's life took an unexpected turn. He crossed paths with Emily, a woman whose warmth and compassion mirrored the love he had once thought unattainable. Their connection deepened, and they found in each other the companionship and strength to overcome the scars that life had inflicted upon them. Reflecting on the harrowing chapter of his life, Michael realized that it had fundamentally changed him. It had taught him to savor every moment, to hold tight to the people he cherished, and to never take anything for granted. He became an advocate for victims of violent crime, channeling his experience into a powerful message of resilience and hope. In the end, Michael's journey was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and thrive in the face of adversity. The dark spectre of that summer day had cast a long shadow, but it had also kindled a light within him, a light that illuminated a path towards redemption, love, and a newfound appreciation for the preciousness of life. Three. In the year 2018, in the heart of California's vibrant city, Los Angeles, life was a bustling symphony of diverse souls navigating their daily routines. Among these countless individuals, a young man named Jack stood out, his heart aflutter with anticipation for an upcoming event that promised to be the highlight of his year. The concert of his dreams, featuring his all-time favorite band, The Killers, was on the horizon. Jack's obsession with The Killers was no secret to those who knew him. He had listened to their songs on repeat, memorized every lyric, and collected every album. The announcement of their concert in Los Angeles had sent ripples of excitement through him, and he had been determined to secure tickets for weeks. However, as the days ticked by, the tickets had become as elusive as a mirage in the desert. Frustration gnawed at Jack's patience as he scoured websites and called ticket vendors in vain. Every avenue he explored seemed to lead to the same disheartening conclusion. The tickets were sold out, and his chances of attending the concert were dwindling. Undeterred by adversity, Jack's resolve drove him to explore an unconventional option: Craigslist. With hope in his heart, he navigated the labyrinthine listings, seeking a glimmer of opportunity. Hours turned into minutes as he scrolled through ad after ad, his eyes scanning for any sign of a lifeline. Then, like a beacon in the digital darkness, Jack stumbled upon a listing that seemed almost too good to be true. A seller named Tommy had listed tickets for the Killers concert at a reasonable price. Hope surged within Jack as he contacted Tommy, and their negotiations soon bore fruit. They agreed to meet in a quiet alley in downtown La, a decision that would forever alter Jack's life. The day of the meeting arrived, and Jack's emotions swirled like a tempestuous sea. Eager anticipation mixed with a subtle undercurrent of anxiety. He had never purchased tickets from a stranger in such an obscure location, but the allure of seeing his beloved band in concert overrode his apprehensions. Arriving at the appointed alley at the precise time, Jack was met by Tony, a figure who exuded an aura of nervous tension. Jack sensed something amiss, but brushed it aside as nerves. With a palpable sense of determination, he handed over the cash to Tommy in exchange for the coveted tickets. However, as soon as Tony's fingers closed around the money, an electrifying shift occurred. In a heartbeat, the alley transformed from a backdrop of anticipation to a theater of terror. Tommy, with chilling swiftness, produced a firearm and trained it on Jack. "Give me everything you have." Tony's voice trembled with desperation. Jack's world shattered in an instant. Panic gripped him as he faced the cold, unforgiving barrel of the gun. His mind raced, and fear coursed through his veins like icy venom. Before he could process the surreal turn of events, Tony pulled the trigger. Gunshots rang out in the confined alley, a cacophony of chaos and cruelty. Jack felt searing pain tear through his chest and leg, and he crumpled to the ground, agony and disbelief merging into a nightmarish crescendo. Blood oozed from his wounds, staining the cold pavement beneath him. In a cruel twist of fate, Tommy stripped Jack of his shoes, his phone, and the cash that had been intended for the concert tickets. Leaving Jack writhing in agony, he fled into the shadowy labyrinth of the city, Jack's belongings clutched tightly in his grasp. Jack's world dimmed as he lay on the unforgiving ground, the world around him fading into obscurity. His life hung by the slimmest of threads, his breaths shallow and ragged. He gazed up at the unforgiving night sky, a sense of hopelessness enveloping him. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A police cruiser, on a routine patrol, passed by the dimly lit alley, its occupants oblivious to the unfolding tragedy. The sharp reports of gunfire, however, were impossible to ignore. In an instant, the officers were alerted, and their instincts kicked into overdrive. They rushed to the scene, their sirens wailing in the Los Angeles night. There they found Jack, his life ebbing away, consciousness slipping like sand through his fingers. The officers wasted no time. They called for an ambulance, their training propelling them into action. At the hospital, a team of dedicated medical professionals confronted the grim reality of Jack's injuries. His wounds were grievous, and the battle to save his life was fraught with uncertainty. For Jack's family and friends, dread hung in the air as they received the dreaded call. They rushed to his side, united in their fervent prayers for his survival. The hours that followed were a relentless struggle. The medical team fought valiantly to stem the tide of blood, to mend the shattered flesh and bone. Jack hovered on the precipice between life and death, his spirit a fragile ember amidst the raging tempest of pain and uncertainty. As Jack clung tenaciously to life, a relentless investigation unfolded in the corridors of law enforcement. The identity of his assailant, obscured by the shadows of that fateful night, became the focus of an unyielding manhunt. The police followed the trail of evidence, piecing together the puzzle of Tony's identity. In time, their pursuit bore fruit, and Tony was apprehended. The threads of his criminal past unraveled, revealing a history marked by violence and a dark penchant for illicit activities. Jack's attack, it seemed, was but one chapter in a sordid saga of criminality. After a protracted and arduous trial, Tony was ultimately found guilty of attempted murder and robbery. His sentence, befitting the gravity of his crimes, was life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Jack, the road to recovery was an arduous one, marred by both physical and emotional scars. He had lost not only his possessions, but also his sense of trust in a world that had betrayed him so brutally. His confidence was shattered, his life upended by an act of senseless violence. Yet, in the midst of the darkness that threatened to consume him, Jack found a glimmer of hope. He embarked on a journey of healing, slowly rebuilding the shattered pieces of his existence. It took time to regain his faith in humanity, but he refused to be defined by the horrors of that night. The wounds, both seen and unseen, left a profound mark on Jack's psyche. The incident was a stark reminder of the perilous nature of trusting strangers, a lesson etched into his very being. As he moved forward, he carried with him the weight of that fateful night, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring resilience of the human spirit.